Good evening and welcome on a Monday night to Generation Movie. My name is J.W. Caldwell. I am joined as always by my co-host in crime, my partner, Rich Dries. How you doing tonight, Rich?
I'm trying to do okay. We're trying to see what happens here, but
Yeah, just battling technology. It's
I,
like
I,
it's like
I
it's
swear
like
to God,
Blade
I
Runner.
don't want to be, but I feel like I'm turning into my parents, and it frightens the hell out of me.
It's fighting technology. Next, we'll be fighting robot machines. Um,
Mm.
anyway, welcome to Generation Movie on a Monday night. We're of course knee deep in Bond-A-THON 2024. These guys causing trouble, stopping bad guys. We're on the guy dead center right now tonight. We're working on Mr. Timothy Dalton's last Bond movie, and there he is on the far right of the picture. If you just get things out of the way before we start talking about shits and giggles and stuff we like. If you like the show, if you want the show to go on, if you want the channel to go on, Indie Escape Network is where we do all our stuff. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It takes literally 2.5 seconds. Like and subscribe and check out all the stuff we're doing. Because after Bond-A-THON, we have some big movies planned for the summer of 2024. We're going to try to make all anniversary movies. So quite a list because you can pick movies from 84, 94, 2004. We're going to work out some anniversary movies. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you do not like YouTube, you don't like the YouTube, I don't know why you don't, but if you do, if you like the Facebook still, if you're still on the Facebook with the Zuckerbergs of the world, like and subscribe to our Facebook page, Indie Escape Network, and we'll keep it running throughout the show. But we like and subscribe all kinds of good stuff going on the Indie Escape Network page, and also, to a lesser degree, also on the Loud Nerdy Facebook group, where you can also like and subscribe to that. A lot of things going on that are kind of coinciding, and you get a lot of Film Buff Online stuff. You get a lot of trailers. You get cool news and displays and trailers like this one that kind of broke the internet today. Everybody's talking, Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's talking about coming together on July 26th. Everybody's talking about how great the poster campaign is already. Everybody's talking about these two guys and finally seeing the costume that everybody has wanted to see forever. And if he puts on the goddamn helmet, people will lose their minds. Um, we haven't seen the helmet yet in the trailer. But also for you, if you look really closely here, Live Field's feet stuff is a pretty big funny joke that's clearly directed at fans of the Deadpool comic book.
Mm-hmm. And
This movie is shaping up.
and
So
for the people who don't get that joke, Rob Liefeld is one of the main architects of the Deadpool character, and as an artist, he always had the I guess you could say
he's got a foot fetish.
reputation
Yeah.
for not being able to draw feet very well. And I know years ago, I made a joke about it on Twitter, didn't even tag him into it or anything.
And now it's in a movie.
And somehow he saw it, which I think means he was just searching for his name because he's that insecure. And he blocked me. And I didn't even know he blocked me until like
Oh,
about
that's interesting. Oh,
about 3 years ago, somebody, quote tweeted one of his things, and I was like, why can't I see what this person who I do follow is quoting? And then I kind of like dug into it, and I was like, oh, it's from Rob.
you got blocked.
When did Rob Liefeld
Um,
block me? For God's sakes!
Why did I get blocked? I think
Yes.
the interesting thing here is I'm dying to hear what all of the talk is going to be about the death of comic book films when this movie opens. Because, Rich, I don't know. The X-Men are on fire on Disney Plus. That show is fire.
I am only 3 episodes in. I know something big happens in 4. I've been really good at trying to avoid spoilers.
Jesus Christ, that show is fire. And you and I have talked about this. It's very much like the old John Wayne line from from Big Jake, the rumors of my demise are greatly exaggerated because I think we're going to get to the middle of the summer in July, and I think this movie's going to open after the Olympics, and I think it's going to gross like $500 million, like domestic. Like I just think on its head, it's going to gross that much. Just because I will tell you the interesting thing for me is that I got a tweet from one of my, not a tweet, but like a direct message today with the LFG, like that the unofficial name of this trailer is the LFG trailer, right? Let's fucking go.
Yep.
And I got a message from a friend who I have not been to the movies with because he's had kids recently and all of these things. So he hasn't been going to the movies with us regularly. And he wrote, I'm in for this one. So he wrote LFG, let's fucking go. And
Nice.
I just think I think it's gonna be one of those movies that we're gonna be babbling about the fact that Marvel movies are dead and all of that. I don't know. I think it's gonna be huge. Also, it bears talking to that somebody's celebrating a birthday today. Not only my good friend Douglas Klein, hope you're well, but this guy is 87 years old today. Let that sink in. That
That's
Jack
a hell of a
Nicholson,
number.
87.
The last detail.
Oh God, what a picture, right?
Nice pull. Nice
I know,
pull.
right? Here's winning one of his many Oscars. Here's a more natural choice of him before he tries to bash in Shelley Duvall's head. And then here's a couple pictures of him just aging, not necessarily gracefully, because he kind of looks like an 87-year-old man. But
imagine that.
He's one of our most eclectic performers. He hasn't performed in a while. And I know this is going to sound weird, but I kind of miss him. Like, last big release was Departed, right? I mean, he had a couple movies after that, but about Schmidt. But can we not say he's one of the greatest actors ever?
He is. He is indeed.
Ranged for days.
Yep.
Let's get some comments on Nicholson, but let's also see who's here tonight. Ken McKernan, of course. Good evening, friends. Good evening, Ken. Ken, I sent you. I hope you looked. I have sent out things about maybe becoming something bigger within the Loud Nerdy group. I hope you looked at that. I know you're older and coming off of health issues, but whatever. Good evening, gentlemen. I hope all is well with you and yours. Thank you very much, Joe. What's up, Joe? And then they're just talking. Still love rich background like this. Yeah, it's all out of necessity and fighting technology. I kind of an announcement, here first. Oh, Ken, how are you? I'm doing good. They're having a full conversation now. Awesome, thank you.
I feel like we're eavesdropping now.
I feel like we're in on a Friends of the Network Mary Catherine Stewart birthday also. Excellent. And then
Happy birthday.
I may be coming back to the network on Sunday night starting June. I may be looking for a producer co-host if anyone might be interested. That's a pretty big announcement. Do you want to come on and talk for a second, Joe? I don't know if you actually want to come on the show. I can just send you an invite really quick. We can get to it before we get to this particularly weird Bond that we're doing tonight. That's the only way to describe it. Hold on, I'm going to send this out to Joe because we're a fully functional show that kind of moves in ebbs and flows and is magical. Maybe we'll see him. Maybe we won't. He sometimes likes to get involved, and then he sometimes doesn't. But if he's coming back, he's going to need a couple. Need to be able to do whatever. I received it, and thank you. Yeah, I thought you'd like that. Greetings and salutations. Have Cheetah with you. Good to see you. We appreciate you coming by, stopping by, and joining us for our foray into the Bond. And we'll see if Joe comes or not. Last thing I want to talk to you about. And I'm a little bit. I want to get snippy for a second. Um, so I read some rules changes for the Academy, and one of the things that the main, just a bunch of changes with the governor's awards and different things, and how they're going to move the ceremony and what they're going to do, and significant changes about original score, which is a really good thing because that means more than one person can get an Oscar, which is absolutely fucking ridiculous. That you have three people working on a score, only one Oscar is given, which is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to take a look. The Academy will no longer recognize drive-in theaters as a qualifying venue for Oscars eligibility, a measure temporarily adopted in 2020 when indoor movie theaters were closed that year. The Academy also allowed films on streaming and VOD platforms to qualify due to the pandemic. I just want to say, I think it's snotty. I think it's fucking snotty that after drive-ins were the only place some of these movies could be seen during the pandemic, and drive-ins kind of kept movie going alive, as best it could, right? Because it was considering it was during the winter and everything else. I think it fucking sucks that the Academy slights drive-ins, and I don't mean it. I don't mean it as a. I guess I do mean it that way. I think it's really insulting to be like, hey, we know you saved us and did some things for us during the COVID pandemic, and you served your purpose. Now go the fuck and go extinct again. And I just think I think it's rude. It's a whole thing. Am I taking this too seriously, Rich, or should it? Is it?
No. I mean, we knew it was temporary. We knew they were gonna it. But at the same time, they're trying to, they in the past several years they've expanded the qualifying cities from just 1 week in LA County or in New York City
Yeah, I
on
read
one
all
screen
that.
to a number of cities. You can have your film show in, I think, like Atlanta for a week and it would qualify.
The Fort Worth Dallas megaplex
Yeah.
is now part of
So
it. It's part of this. I'm glad they're expanding. I think that's about right. But I just think, why are we sliding drive-ins?
it feels like, yeah, it does feel like it's kind of smacking it in the face. But like I said,
I knew they were going to change it, but I just think it's snotty. And
that's true.
And I think for a lot of people, their first movie going experience is at a drive-in. Like, I was thinking about it. Like, some of my first experiences were at a drive-in, seeing
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars. You know what I mean? So the idea that this is a medium that we just had that thing happen with the Mahoning Drive-In. May he rest in
Yeah,
peace.
the projectionist there who had been kind of the owner and
And
allowed.
kept it everything 35 millimeter, and he just passed away. And it's like, this is like, I feel like it's another slight against drive-ins, and I love drive-ins. I love the Circle Drive-In. I love all the drive-ins I grew up with. I used to go to the drive-in in Honesdale. It was beautiful on a dark night in the middle of nowhere in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think for the Academy to be like, everything's cool with streaming and everything. Your movie still has to premiere in theaters and everything, but also drive-ins go back into your. We don't need you anymore. I mean, if there's another pandemic, we'll need you.
Yeah.
But we don't need you anymore. And I just think it's snotty. I don't know. I love drive-ins, and I think not tonight, but thank you. Okay. Tahiti is a magical place. Okay, very true. We're going to talk about that. Is the studio going to have studio pay for their awards? No. I mean, are you talking about the campaigns? IFC Films was going during the pandemic. I think a lot of movies, a lot of low budget movies and everything were playing at the drive-ins. And I think for me, it's an all encompassing thing. It's one, not recognizing the history of the drive-in in the United States, which is a terrible thing to not grasp onto, how important a cultural icon a drive-in is, right? That's a big problem for the film industry, especially at a time when you know, a drive-in is one of the few places you can see a movie
Wow.
uniquely in this world, right? It's definitely different from everything you experience at your house.
Mm-hmm.
It's all different. So I just think I read that today and I was a little sad. I was excited that you know everything's on par and they're gonna fix some of the stupid stuff, like the score thing and everything. But the drive-in slight pissed me off to
Yeah.
no.
Okay. You can switch me now, by the way.
Okay, you're back and you're gone. There you go, and we're working. Um, the film industry is trying to kill physical media as well. That's also true. Although I will say what has happened with physical media is it's starting to it's perked up a little bit. So even as they're starting to kill it, the last few bunch of movies like Oppenheimer on 4K and different things, uh, the Cameron films did very well on 4K. So I can
They just
understand.
announced today coming on 4K later in I think July, um, both South Park Bigger Longer Uncut and Team America World Police. So there's some people out there who are going, let's look at a few of our catalog titles and see if we can get them out on 4K, which is exciting. And also later this year, I think Fathom is doing a because I think it's the 25th anniversary of South Park Bigger Longer Uncut.
It is
They're doing
definitely happening.
yeah, they're doing a sing along event re-release.
Blame
So if
Canada.
you ever wanted to see Uncle Fuck at the top of your lungs in a theater, now's your chance.
That seems exciting. I just I want the Academy every once in a while to. I want Twister on 4K. Here's the thing. Interesting note I had read about Twister at some point. Some of these movies aren't going to be in 4K because the way they were shot and the way and like a lot of them, Twister especially was also one of the movies. If you look at it at Blu-ray and whatever, there was a lot of trouble in the transfer of Twister. So Twister is one of the interesting movies where Warner Brothers always had trouble with that movie, how it looked in on Blu-ray. I know this is a true statement. Like I know I've read it somewhere that because of the way Twister was shot, it was like it kind of like with everything kind of like moving, it doesn't really work well on disc. But that's just something I read. Okay.
I mean, it would be a good time to release it on 4K with Twisters coming this summer.
I
You
can
know,
I
you
tell you I have
kind
no
of
feeling. I have no feeling.
but
I have no feeling about that movie whatsoever. I want Glenn Powell to succeed, but I also like the idea that they have Dorothy and they're not going to mention the original. To me, is like the weirdest, fucking like just weird. Like he's not going to be Bill Paxton's son or something. Really? Okay. I don't understand, Rich. Making a legacy sequel without any mention of the original legacy makes no fucking sense to me.
I think
Now, I'm gonna go
they're
see the
going.
movie.
It's going to be some mention in there. I think they're just kind of saying it that it isn't, not to get your hopes too high. I mean, you know, obviously Bill Paxton's not with us anymore, so he can't pop in.
I missed him so much.
But my thought is, in 4K, how good are those early computer effects going to look? I mean, I don't
exactly
care.
right. That's what I mean. Can speaking of Bill Paxton,
Well, I kind of don't care because, you know, it was the state of the art at the time, and I'd rather see that preserved. So let me see if it's a janky looking effect or not, because that was the best we could do. And
I think Twister's one of the jankiest, but also one of the coolest movies.
Good.
I think it's a cool movie, but it's also janky.
Yeah.
Also, can we talk about Bill Paxton for a second? Have you ever seen Frailty?
No.
Okay, so Frailty
Shame
is
on
the
me.
Night of the Hunter of Bill Paxton.
Ooh.
Frailty is the only movie he directed. It's Matthew McConaughey and Powers Booth. And I gotta tell you, it's one of the absolute best suspense movies I've ever seen. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Like it's really funny that him and Charles Lawton only directed one movie apiece, and they're both movies about kids dealing with sociopaths, and
Interesting.
they're both fantastic. McConaughey, Powers Booth, Bill Paxton. He's in it. He plays a dad, who believes that God has given him the ability to see demons, and so he becomes a serial killer kind of thing.
wouldn't-
Well, God gives him the ability to see demons, and he gives him an axe to kill the demons.
Mhm.
It's a fantastic movie, and it's really good. It's just one of those, but it's also the only movie ever directed. So it's like Charles Lawton only directing the Night of the Hunter, which, by the way,
Which
I'm gonna tell you right now, we're remaking Night of the Hunter. The book was way more graphic than the movie. I hope they do it justice, but I also hope it inspires a whole generation to go and experience the Night of the Hunter, because it's such a great film noir.
yeah.
Lillian Gish is so good in that movie.
It was just a case where Lawton was operating on a level that critics and audiences weren't ready for. Really,
They
You know,
weren't
if you
prepared.
ever,
It's ahead of its time.
yeah,
I agree.
yes, exactly.
Frailty is amazing. It is. It's terrific. It is. I agree. Have cheated with you. And now we've come to the part of the show where we talk Bond, James Bond.
Mm.
And we talked this movie here, License to Kill. It was originally titled License Revoked. And you know, I don't know how I feel, Rich. I was watching it today, and I have to admit I haven't seen it since '89, and then I started thinking about my 1989. Holy fuck, Rich! This movie got released into a meat grinder.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
and it's patently unfair, the meat grinder it got released into. Because think about that summer. That summer we had Ghostbusters 2, we had Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, we had Batman, which opened a month before this movie opened. We
Mhm.
had Lethal Weapon 2, which opened like 2 weeks after it. So not only is it competing with all of these movies, it's competing with the franchise. It's competing with Dalton to a certain extent, being a good
it's
Bond.
it's competing with newer stuff that kind of makes the idea of Bond feel maybe a little old fashioned at times.
Obsolete is the word you're looking for. And
I was
then
trying to be nice.
I know you're trying to be nice. But here's the thing. I think I like it, but I also I put up my thing tonight. Dalton walk so Craig could run. I think it's as close to a Craig Bond before we get to
Mhm.
Craig, right?
Oh yeah, it's
Now,
it feels very close to the literary Bond too.
it is very
It,
close, and he is. I will say that about Dalton. There is never a moment with Dalton, and we'll go into production. I got some cool pictures to look at. Like, how about this with production, Rich? How about a young Benicio del Toro that I had totally
maybe
forgot was in
Benicio.
this? Look at how young he's a pup.
I know. What's
And then
crazy is his career, of course. Out of I mean, doing a Bond film is not the career boost for many of the people in these things. Unfortunately, I mean, maybe Barbara Bach and a couple of other people here and there,
borderline a
but
career ender sometimes.
yeah. But for Benicio del Toro to come through this thing, and
He's actually pretty good
um,
in it. He's actually
yeah,
scary.
he's pretty good. This is one of his very first roles, and it certainly wasn't an impediment for him anymore, which I think shows how much of the goods he really has as an actor.
So with production, I always like to find stories. The interesting story here with this production is that it will be the end of the road for so many things that are all part of Bond's DNA, right? So it's the last movie that John Glenn will direct in the Bond franchise. It's the last Bond that will feature Robert Brown as M, Carolyn Bliss as Miss Moneypenny. It's also the last feature to work with Richard Malbum, who's made a lot of the Bond movies that we've talked about.
Yeah, we were just
last
discussing
time
what he wrote last week.
last time Maurice Binder will do the title design, and thank God, because apparently it's just women naked jumping. Is this
far
one?
be it from me not to
I'm not saying I'm
express
not
enjoyment
complaining.
for
Just saying
a beautiful naked woman, and I enjoy good work, God, thank you. But yeah, that's kind of
it's a dead on arrival. It's a dead on arrival,
feeling so obsolete and old fashioned. It's like, yeah, we've seen this for 20 years now,
and it is coincidentally the last Albert R. Broccoli produced Bond. They all died before the next Bond came out. I think that's an interesting storyline. I think it's also an interesting story. Go ahead.
There was some legal stuff that delayed the next Bond from happening, because they were working on scripts for the next 2 Bonds for Dalton, by the time this was all over, and it just wound up never happening, unfortunately. And but we'll get into a little bit.
Lots of turmoil, lots of upheaval. And then you start reading into the production that this is the first Bond where it's not produced at basically at Pinewood, right? They set up a deal with Mexican film studios, so they filmed on location. It's the first Bond that's predominantly shot in North and South America, right? So there's so many little things that lead it to not be Bondian, right? Like, it's weird, and they start kind of like, as the production is going, they start adding up. You know what I mean? Like, it's the first Bond that doesn't have a title from the book or whatever, and you're like, okay, that doesn't really matter. It's the first Bond that isn't shot on location in Pine Street Studios. That's weird, right? That like, and
honestly,
it shouldn't matter, right? It
gives the film a bit of a freshness that it feels like the franchise knows that it's getting stale, and by mixing it up and saying, okay, we're not going to shoot in Pinewood, we're going to shoot entirely on location in Mexico, and you get all these beautiful locations, including places
it's one of the best parts of the movie, but it makes it, I think, when it's like a time capsule movie. It's like you had all these franchises that were kind of shooting for Bond's glory, and starting with Batman and Lethal Weapon in its second movie, and this is a year after Die Hard. And I kept on looking at all the people in the movie. They're all Die Hard people. Like, the Johnsons are in this movie, and they have a scene together. So it's like, I don't know, it's weird, and it was probably shot before Die Hard, but it's weird. And I just think it
I don't think so.
You think it was shot after?
I'd have to double check, but I think Die Hard shot first.
Well, Die Hard came out first, right?
Yeah.
This was shot. It took a year to shoot, is what I read. July 18th to November 1988.
Yeah, and Die Hard came out. Oh yeah,
Die Hard came out. Yeah, okay. So, but it's still like all these people are from Die Hard, and I was like looking at it, going, okay, all the and so it's the first movie in the franchise where there are other franchises that are bubbling up that are going to be just as popular, and it's got to be a weird production thing, right? It's got to be the kind of thing where it kind of seeps in to the production a little bit, right? The casting, some of the casting stuff was weird. The Carrie Lowell casting thing where they didn't even have a script ready. She had to read from For Your Eyes Only. You know what I mean? Like, that just boggles the mind. Like, how are we going into a Bond movie without a full production script ready, or even a sides written? To me, is like, it's chaos. It seemed like we had talks in some of the other ones we've done where there's been chaos behind the scenes because people are fighting over rights. This is the first one where there's chaos and we don't know what we're doing, and we've lost our way a little bit because we're no longer the golden franchise, right? At this point in the '80s, Raiders has hit. Indiana Jones franchise is in its third movie when this movie comes out. Die Hard's already
Mhm.
hit. Batman's just starting. Lethal Weapon's on its second movie. We've had all these other franchises pop up, and I think the production is kind of playing scared. Is the like it seems scared. Like we have to change. Like we have to change it, as opposed to knowing what a Bond film is and trying to make it work. Does that make sense to you?
It feels like it's struggling to find the right amount of
Rhythm.
spectacle. As I was watching it this earlier this evening again, I mean, I had seen it when it came out, obviously, and I watched it a couple of times since then, and I've grown to like it a bit more than that weekend evening, opening weekend evening when I walked out of the theater with some friends, and I was just kind of like, ugh. I do find more things about it to like now. I like that everything's a practical effect here. There's
Everything, including all the truck stunts. The
the
truck
truck
stunt, like
stop.
the truck stunts at the end are fantastic, and the one
Yes.
was a real stunt. There is a sequence where a tractor trailer hits a cliff and rides on its wheels, and a Stinger
Mhm.
missile misses it. That's a real fucking stunt.
And that's really dangerous and difficult to do. And they had to do it, I think, in one take, but with a couple different cameras
Yes,
because the
he
thing
went
keeps
through
going
18.
along doing the sideways wheelie and then crushes the Jeep before it drops
Yeah,
back
there are
down.
three. There are three trucks in the movie, tanker trucks in the sequence, but there were 18 trucks that they crushed, destroyed, did all kinds of damage. That is worth noting in the production. I
Oh
think
yeah.
the what's it? The
The,
gentleman's name is
you have the You have the
Remy
flaming Jeep
Julian.
going over the plane. You have all the underwater stuff. Everything is so well done practically. There was a shot, and every time I watched the movie, I wasn't sure if it was or not until finally, like about an hour before we started, I popped the disc back in and just listened to the commentary track for that sequence when they're at the Temple of Meditation, which is an actual real life place in Mexico that was built, centuries ago, called the Otomi Ceremonial Center. It's in Teamoa, and
Mr. Joe,
we
baby.
have that, we have that shot where we're looking at it, and then then this hatch opens up and a helicopter comes in behind and lands and goes down, and then this hatch closes. I was like, well, obviously, the people who built this facility centuries ago did not have an elevator or a helicopter hatch installed. So how did they do that? And it turns out, and I was kind of right. It was just a forced perspective miniature that's like here in front of the camera. The real life location's way down there, and you set your focus right, and it just comes up. You bring your helicopter in
it's all
behind
practical.
it. So
It's really well
so
done.
simple. It's so simple, and it looks so good though. And I mean, this is the same
That's the
tricks
thing.
that
There
Peter
are
Jackson was using, but
Remy Julian is the stunt coordinator responsible for all the car stunts. They had a closed highway in Mexico that was closed because it was a dangerous highway. You know what I mean? Like it's just stuff you can't read or write about, and I think that's really interesting. I think the movie itself, like one of the interesting things is it has a ridiculous opening sequence that's kind of comical, but also David Hedison, who played Felix Leiter, actually got injured with the stunt, so like he was limping around the rest of the time. But that's it. It's all practical. Everything's pretty well done. You know,
there's like maybe a couple of shots of Bond fighting in that plane in the beginning where it's rear projection. You're in a studio mock-up, but even like shots of Pam flying the plane. It's like I'm looking at this going, okay, that plane is literally parked on the ground. The camera is like pointing up so you don't get any of the horizon. You see the tail disappearing out of frame.
Yes,
No,
they
it's
built
sitting.
something onto the plane where they had whoever was driving the plane was in the back of the plane where so you couldn't see them.
Well,
So it's
no,
all right.
I'm
It
thinking of
looks
one
beautiful.
particular shot. I'm thinking of one particular shot where it's. I mean, as I'm looking at it, going, I know how they did that, but it looks really good. It looks like, and then they just have the
It
camera
does
like
look.
down on the ground, looking
It
up at
does
her,
look
and
amazing.
they just truck the camera like this, and that gives you the idea of the plane, slowly flying by and everything. It's so, it's such
So
craftsmanship here.
quick questions. Did they pick a new Bond yet? No, they haven't. They have 3 more weeks to do so. We have 2 more weeks. We have 2 more weeks left. They have 2 more weeks to do so we can talk about it endlessly at the top of the show. We need to control this chaos. I would love to. I think the production, like the
Announce when you're
interesting thing
ready.
about the production is again, it's the end of the road for so many lifers, like Bond lifers. One thing I will say about the production is John Glenn does seem tired. I mean, he passes away the following year. It does seem like it's like, okay, we're going to just shoot the shot. It doesn't feel like, like the verve you get when somebody kind of jumps into it, and it's you know the verve that you get during the Craig Bonds, where sometimes a big director shows up and makes the movie like we're going to talk about in 2 weeks. Where you go, oh, this is exciting. They're playing with new things. So I think that's part of the production. I think that's part of the story.
I still say that there are some interesting shots in this thing. During Bond's attack on the wave crest, and when he gets onto the pontoon boat, when he and he does the whole water ski thing, and he gets up to the pontoon itself as the plane is taking off. There's a great shot. Again, they put the camera on the pontoon, and we see it, and it's Timothy Dalton. This ain't no stunt man. We see him coming up out of the water and grappling onto the plane and everything, which I'm like, boy, if I was the insurance on set, I'd be having a fit.
That's an insurance nightmare. Well, that's the thing. I think Dalton. That's the thing about Dalton. The interesting a part of the production that you have to talk about is that Dalton was game, but like Henry Cavill, right? Dalton was game, but he happened to hit the franchise in the middle of a tumultuous time. The end of Roger Moore's run, where the Bonds got progressively weaker, and then Dalton's Living Daylights, which is actually much better than I expected when we reviewed it last year, right? And then this, where it's like, all these other action movies are coming out around it. So it becomes this weird, like, we don't know what we're going to do. And it doesn't have a lot of the Bond things. Like, I production wise, like, I think these are some, like, they're interesting Bond girls, but they're not great Bond girls. So they're interesting, and then like there's a little bit, it's a weird casting thing. Like Lisa Soto got cast because she knew Robert Davey, and Robert Davey got cast because he was able to, affect some sort of, like, he could be anything. Like he got cast because they didn't know if they were going to do a drug warlord from from Mexico, or they were going to do something else, and he could play either one, right? If it was going to be from Cuba, or if it was like, so they had no idea. And so there's like a lot of the casting and everything is kind of like weird. Like Terry Lowell is in a wig for half the movie because she was a short-haired girl that they just didn't believe could look good short-haired. And then once they put her in short hair in the movie, her regular look, she looks Bondian,
Stunning.
like a Bond girl. Yeah, stunning.
Yeah.
So it's
Crazy.
like this weird, like, we don't know what the fuck we're doing, but we do kind of. Let's see. Sophie Marceau is my favorite Bond. Okay, I mean, we have a co-host that occasionally shows up that would kill you for not saying Vesper. Anyway, everybody, a lot of people's Ava Green's a lot of people's recent favorite Bond girl. Also, Judi Dench
Mhm.
isn't a bad choice as a Bond girl as well. The same.
Not sure I qualify Judi Dench as a Bond girl.
She could be. Anyway, but production, it happens. They, it takes a long time to film. It practical effects, all kinds of good stuff going on within the basis of the movie. We got to talk about the music for a second. Um, this song is terrible. Although I'm gonna say this, like it becomes a top 10 hit for Gladys Knight. And it like it's this weird like it's Goldfinger-ish, but not nearly as good as Goldfinger. It doesn't like Rich explain to me this music because this song is terrible, and also it's the first time we've Michael Kamen takes over for the first time ever. Kamen is
Mhm.
famous for doing a bunch of action movies from the 80s. He takes over, and the music's okay. But this song, and then there's another song by Patti LaBelle at the end that's theoretically a better song than the License to Kill song.
This will not be the first nor the last time that their end song is better than their title credit song. I don't think either song is really that great, to be honest. They both kind of just slide off me. I'm just like, oh, whatever. I think, though, when we're talking about Kamen's score and everything, I think what's really interesting is we don't get the Bond score. We don't get, the famous Bond theme until literally the last 10 minutes of the movie when he goes to pop the wheelie in the semi.
Yes, and it's weird. It's a weird decision. It's
Yeah, I mean,
it's like you're taking this character and not giving him any of the armor that he needs to fight.
I would say, I mean, it makes sense in Casino Royale where you hold that until the very end because that's the whole character arc of his in the movie is becoming that badass James Bond character, and then he's earned his theme. Here, I could almost say yeah, because he's technically, resigned from the Secret Service for most of the movie. Don't give it to him, but we still could have had it in that whole first segment, and we don't. That whole first segment before.
Tell me when he's killing people underwater in the scuba thing. You don't want the Bond theme to rear up. You know what I mean? Like when he's ripping masks off people and they cut his hose and he's dodging fucking like harpoons. They're all good sequences. Like that's the other thing. Like it's weird. It's
they're good action sequences.
They're good action sequences. It's just like it's a weird. Like if you're telling me it's a Bond film, it like there are pieces and chunks of it that are not Bond, so that it becomes so much so that I think what happened when it came out in '89, we're going to talk about it right now as we go to it. I think what happens is it falls into the cracks. Like we're talking about like let's look at some pictures too. There's Bond and the incredibly stunning with short hair Carrie Lowell, amazing. Bond with like again Dalton very game in all these shots where he's in the choppers and he was actually I read somewhere that he was the one that actually put the hook on the plane at the beginning, which is amazing.
That's
Robert, that's nuts. Robert Davi is a pretty good Bond villain, although he doesn't have world aspirations. I was watching it. When Wayne Newton showed up, and then I realized that the only way Wayne Newton got into the movie was he just asked somebody. He asked the Broccolis if he could be in a Bond movie, and then I was watching it going, I want him to be the Bond villain.
Let me ask you a question about his character.
I think he'd be a fantastic Bond villain now.
Do you think that his character knows what's going on with all the drug smuggling, or he just thinks he has a wealthy benefactor who set him up with this gig and he's just playing it for?
I don't know, but I think this Professor Joe. Tell me this Professor Joe wouldn't work right now. A cult leader, a Bond film about a cult. Tell me that wouldn't work right now.
Oh, it would definitely.
But
do you think he's here in this movie? He's a villain, or is he just a dupe?
No, he's got to know. I don't know that he knows the intricacies of like when I say a number, that's how much keys are going to cost.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he knows who built the temple, and I think he knows the temple's on a giant drug outfit. He has to. He's running with all the scientists at the end when they steal the money back from him. I don't know. And then there's Talisa Soto. She's the other Bond girl.
It's odd though that if he was complicit with the bad guys, that he doesn't get killed. Because everybody else, from
yeah, but
you know, obviously,
money, and he loses his
Toro,
temple.
the
little shiny guy, yeah, the little Weasley white guy that Schwarzenegger would have dropped off a cliff.
It's such an
Turner
indictment
Hodge.
of.
I believe his name is Turner Hodge, to be exact.
It's such an indictment of 80s yuppie scumbaggerism that it's almost like, you know, this guy would have been murdered if he was in
that is one thing I will give a lot of credit for. This movie has a sheer volume of people that show up where you go, holy shit. Like you know, Everett McGill, who's, you know, in the first Dune, he was also in Silver Bullet. He plays a corrupt DEA agent. He's fantastic.
Yes.
Del Toro shows up and you're like, what the fuck? Truman Lodge is played by Anthony Stark. Anthony Zerbe, we haven't even talked about him. He shows up and also has the most graphic death in the history of a Bond film. That actually had to be cut so the movie wouldn't get an R rating. You know, he's killed in a decompression thing. But
Priscilla Barnes, who we all knew as the second blonde on Three's Company, and in a couple of movies and stuff like that too. She was a well-known face at that point when she popped up in the movie for me. I was like, oh,
and she's really warm. Although she kisses Bond way too much. If you're at a wedding and the bride is kissing the best man that much,
yeah,
I'd have questions as the groom. Box office. So this movie opened. We talked about this. This is the nightmare scenario for Bond. Is that Bond opens in the midst of one of the greatest summers for films ever. Like 89 was a summer where it just the films didn't stop. Like Lethal Weapon 2, Ghostbusters 2, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which had Bond in it, just so we're clear, and Batman, right? All open in 89 against this movie. And so it opens. The numbers are staggeringly low. Although in dollars today it's much higher, but it grossed worldwide. We go to the numbers, which is a great website to do this, and it grosses. First off, budget is $42 million, which is only $2 million up from Living Daylights, which was made 2 years earlier. So they're conserving on budget. It grosses domestic box office is $34 million, which is 17 down from the Living Daylights. Again, part of the summer of '89. It opens 2 weeks after 4th of July weekend and is still in the wake of a little film called Batman, which is gonna just crush the entire summer. And then once Batman got done, Lethal Weapon opened in late July. So it was like just a punishing, brutal kind of thing. It ends up grossing worldwide $156 million. Now, Living Daylights 2 years earlier grossed $191 million. And also had $51 million at the U.S. box office. So it's, when you do adjusted domestic gross, it's a $93 million movie, but Living Daylights was 141 adjusted. So it's a massive letdown, and part of it, has to be the competition, doesn't it, Rich? This was a brutal summer not to have a a Joker in your movie.
Yeah, it's funny it's funny we're having this discussion on Jack Nicholson's birthday.
Yes, I
But
don't think
yeah,
don't think the irony isn't lost on me. It's not.
yeah, I mean, yeah, we are seeing a couple of new franchises where they're having their first or second sequel, but
Or third
and I think
sequel with
I
Bond.
think with Bond, this is like the what 23rd or something
No,
like.
no. It's 16th. But what I'm saying is, you're saying first sequel or third sequel or first time, but I'm saying it's a third movie with the original Bond in it. Sean Connery is sitting right there with Harrison Ford in Last Crusade.
True,
So
but
it's
what I was getting to though was all these other movies are still kind of fresh and new. And again, this is kind of the old thing. So I think people are like, you know what, we've had it, we'll get to Bond maybe, but if I have only so much to spend on movies this month, I'd rather go see Ghostbusters. I'd rather go see the new Ghostbusters because I loved the first one from 5 years ago. It's been 5 years since we've had Ghostbusters, and it's been 2 years since we've had a Bond movie. So
I think Lethal Weapon is too. Lethal Weapon hit, and then Lethal Weapon 2 came out. And if you remember how excited people were for a Mel Gibson movie when he wasn't crazy and abusive to waitresses and shit. Just the idea that Lethal Weapon 2 came out and Lethal Weapon 1 came out in 87. So it's a 2-year delay, and Lethal Weapon 2 was bigger than Lethal Weapon 1, and Lethal Weapon 2 in many ways is the rare sequel that some people would say, if you ask me a question like, can you give me a sequel that's better than the original? Lethal Weapon 2 is something you could throw into that conversation to cause chaos. Speaking of chaos, from our good friend Have Cheatable View. But I think part of it is also it just Dalton wasn't as eye popping as we thought he could be. And the thing is, part of the sadness here is I feel Dalton is like Cavill, right? He's Superman without a great Superman movie. He's a Bond that could have grown into a really good Bond.
Well,
Or maybe even a great Bond.
Okay, part of it is, he's a definite big vibe switch from the Roger Moore era.
Everything was jokes and pussy. Everything was jokes and pussy. And Dalton is serious, revenge based, also taking the Bond thing very seriously. Because he read the books and he liked the books. So he was trying real hard. But the box office thing is an interesting thing.
But
I
think it's but beyond that, I mean, I think he could have grown on the public if they were more getting on board. But like I said, again, there was all these legal things that kind of popped up. Albert Broccoli passing away, that kind of delayed getting to that next film, that 17th film, until ultimately Dalton was like, you know what, guys,
I'm out.
Find somebody new because I think I'm over being it. And
that really good.
And when I have that great that big giant Bond 50th anniversary thing, and when I open it up and I only see 2 movies here for Mr. Dalton, it does kind of make me a little sad because I think he could have been, with a little bit better luck and maybe a bit more receptive public, he could have been, he could have been one of the greats.
Yeah, he could. He actually had a lot going on, and he was. And the other thing that you notice in this movie, and we'll talk about it now. One of the things you notice is he's gung ho for stunts. He's capable. He does them. He moves it like he, did the parachuting. He actually hooked up the plane to the hook, which is ridiculous. Does a lot of the stunts with regards to the driving and did some things, where not obviously all the whatever, but so how does this Bond rate up? Right? I don't hate it. I think it's actually a pretty good Bond, but the problem is in '89 when this movie hits, all of the reasons to love a Bond movie are like cliche, right? So this movie doesn't have it has an opening sequence, but it's not a great opening sequence. It's a weird opening sequence because Bond is involved with like a wedding. So it's like, so you're immediately taken out of it with that. Then
Mm-hmm.
it gets real personal really quick. And then it kind of like, for me, it just like everything starts to like pile on top of things where it's just like it can't get out from under itself. Now, are there great action sequences? Yes, there are. Like the underwater stuff is fantastic. As a Florida person, person who lives in Florida right now, the Hemingway House, one of the coolest places you'll ever go to. The cats running around, it's fantastic. So it has a sense of style with Key West and understands. Um, the Grizzly sequence with Felix that was actually taken from one of the books is amazing, right? Although probably too much for most Bond fans. Most Bond fans don't want that kind of shit. We can
Yeah,
have a girl painted gold. We can have a girl painted gold, but I don't want Felix to get his legs bit off.
I remember at the time there was one of the big criticisms towards the movie was the violence.
The darker tone.
Felix, what happens to Benicio del Toro, which kind of is a bit of a poetic justice thing. I agree. I'll admit, though, seeing Robert Davi burned to death,
Yeah, there's a
Felix's wife
darker tone.
being raped to death. There's a few things in there that's just like,
Oh, the Priscilla Barnes. When he finds Priscilla Barnes, she has her eyes wide open, like she's been. I don't even know. Like it's just a horrific look.
Mhm.
I think Dalton works great as Bond, but he isn't given a lot to do. He is just reacting and he's doing whatever. The idea that this is a Bond that's doing a revenge tale, and they have to insert things in so that he can survive. Like there's a whole Desmond Llewellyn Q sequence where he shows up and he's just on vacation. And while it's wonderful, it is wonderfully playful, and like he has amazing chemistry with Carrie Lowell and Dalton himself. It's just this weird, like, because we need to have Q, he shows up on vacation and he has a bunch of cool shit. It's charming.
I think he was just being tongue in cheek about I'm on vacation, or maybe he is technically on vacation. But I have a feeling if M didn't just give him a little like, just get out there.
Moneypenny is the only one that's worried. Moneypenny is the one that sends all the stuff. I think for a Bond film, like it's weird. Like I'll give you like places where I just had weird icky like. I never get icky about the title sequences of a Bond film, but this one was gross. Like this one was the kind of thing where like it's just like these weird tiny women with very tiny perky, boobies, and it was just weird. And it like they're just running and jumping, like, and it has nothing to do with like a drug cartel, has nothing to do with revenge, has nothing, like all of these things, like the song doesn't work for me. So now I'm down. I was thinking about it. I'm down two things. Also, the car he's driving, the rental car he's driving, it bothered me. Like I'm watching the rental car, and it's like when he gets to Isthmus, when he gets to the little country that's like a fake country, it's cool because he gets a Rolls Royce, and that's neat, right? And Q's driving around the Rolls Royce, fantastic. But up until that point, he's driving around a box, and it's like, would Bond have that, or would he get the sports car? You know what I mean? Like, and for whatever reason, it took me out of it. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think while I started getting into the movie, and like, Del Toro's so scummy, and the sharks are scary, and like decompression chamber is horrible. The villains are good, but I think there might be like a too real kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, a drug lord who's planning to sell more drugs, but isn't like, it's weird. I mean, it's weird.
You talk about not Bond not having much to do. I think I kind of wish, as I'm thinking about this now, so I'm hopefully not coming off too disjointed as I'm trying to piece this together. towards the beginning, they made mention of, oh, he was married once, and
Yes,
I think that's supposed to be the driver of why he is
catalyst.
extracting
Yes,
revenge
and he gets a
for
nice
Felix.
lighter. He gets a nice
Um,
lighter that is Chekhov's gun. It's he's
well,
going to use it.
I wish there was some way more to develop Bond, working through, his anger and his hurt about losing Tracy in this movie. I wish there was a way that they could have brought that more in outside of that one line, So it's like, okay, it's one
she
line.
wants to throw the garter at him. And he's like, fuck off. I don't want the garter.
Arc, but nothing else happens.
Well, it's like it's weird shit like that where it's like it's a throwback to a great concept. Like he would go to the wedding, but he wouldn't catch the garter because he's never going to be married again, right? And it becomes like a joke that that she has to like. Even Bond doesn't react well to that to the point where he's in the scene. Like he catches the garter, he gets in the car, he drives away in the boxcar, and she later has to explain to her, oh, but he was married once, and so even they're helping the Bond fans out, like in case you haven't seen it. I think Dalton is game, but I think the script is like it's so like one note, like I'm going for revenge. Like it would be like it's kind of like this weird. It's like a revenge movie, but it's not like Bond's gonna win because he's Bond, but it's also like this like so that like that doesn't work in revenge movies. The reason revenge movies work is because it's somebody normal who's doing the revenge, and it's a changing character. Bond killing a drug lord is not a changing character, right? It's this weird thing. I was midway through. I really wanted the Wayne Newton character to be the big bad. I was thinking to myself how great a villain would be, a guy who leads a cult. How fantastic that would be.
Well, we do see Bond get a moment of as close to a moment of emotional release as we get at this point in the franchise. Like after he sees Robert Davi burn up, and he kind of goes around, the truck blows up, and he kind of ducks behind that boulder, and he leans, and he kind of goes like, he sits down, leans back against the boulder, and he's kind of like, just a little bit of a sigh, and I think that's nice. That's him releasing everything.
Well, yeah, like there is.
He doesn't cry. He doesn't have a real emotional outburst or anything. It's very small, and I like that. And then of course, Ham shows up in the truck cab to so they can drive off.
Are you gonna get in? And it's like a joke. Like, and that's the other thing. Another thing that bothers me about this movie, and again, I don't hate it. It's weird. Because I really feel it's a necessary movie to get to the Craig Bonds, to be able to free Craig to do whatever the fuck he wants. I don't. There's no there's chemistry between him and Carrie Lowell, but it's a weird chemistry because like they break out of the bar. And tell me you didn't feel this. They break out of the bar. They get in the thing. He starts barking at her. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing, and she's like a fucking like army pilot. And then he runs out of gas, and she's like, isn't the first time I've heard that, right? And then he hooks up with her, and it's like, okay, does she know that he's Bond? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's all of these other women that hook up with him. It's because he's Bond, right? Mm-hmm. And even the Talisa Soto character, he doesn't hook up with her, and she's the one that you go, that's the one you would hook up with because she's the one that has all the information. So it's this weird, like he hooks up with her, he kisses her once, and then he kisses her again. He feels guilty about it at the end. That's all another weird sequence of events that occur in a Bond movie that never occurs in a Bond movie, where he gets kissed by a beautiful woman and he feels bad about it because Carrie Lowell is crying in her handkerchief and runs out of the party. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Do you know what I mean? Like, and not in a bad way, but not in a good way either. So it's like you're watching it, and like the action sequences are good. Bond's on a revenge mission. He gets, everybody's angry with him at British Secret Service, and they send one guy who's inept to get him. They also there's a whole thing where, there's a Chinese I guess the original concept was a Chinese drug lord, right? That gets kind of thrown into this script amalgam, that there'll be Chinese drug lords who show up to, to kind of make the big central drug lord even bigger, a bigger drug lord, a worldwide drug lord. And it's just it's it's meh. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just it doesn't feel Bondy to me. I know it sounds like I feel like I want it to be so much better than it is, and I love Dalton. I was thinking about it today. He never got his chance, man. Never gets his chance, and I think it's one of those weird, like, tales of history. We'll talk about the Dalton Bond. We'll talk about the Lazenby Bond as like these bonds that could have been something special, could have been great, and it just kind of it's very one note. Like, that's what I was thinking about. Like, there's nothing uplifting. Like, sometimes when we watch a Bond movie, you're like, okay, Bond's like, this is cool. Like, he knows the plan. He's going to be able to get to where he needs to go, and he's going to stop somebody. You know what I mean? Like, this is just like, it's a weird, like, even the last final sequence plays out is just, it's weird. Am I wrong? Or I don't
No.
know. And I think, while I enjoy the truck sequence is the best sequence in the movie. Like, the truck fight, like, there are several levels of the truck fight that is really great, where my favorite being, there's a moment where Bond drives through the thing and he kind of raises, like, it's clearly a rig on a thing, so he doesn't hit the tires, and he goes through this fire, the flaming kind of like corridor, and then another truck comes through the corridor and immediately blows up, and it's like, that's cool. Like I said, I thought midway through, I was like, I would have loved if Professor Joe Butcher was actually the big bad behind France. I would have been fascinated by that concept. But it's like I said, here's the thing. Some of the reactions, like, I was looking at the reactions, like, this is a widely regarded. When you look at Rotten Tomatoes, it's at 79 from the critics, and it's at let's see, 80 from the critics, 61 from regular people.
I'd like to dig into those numbers at some point, just because I seem to recall most people not liking this as much as.
Well, it's weird, and there's a big to do if you read into that. This is one of those revisionist ones where retrospectivists come into play.
Yeah,
a lot of people
exactly.
It was the worst Bond ever. Next to actually, I take that back. It's not. No, at no time was it ever considered the worst Bond ever. The worst Bond ever is always, and I mean, the two that come up the most are A View to a Kill, Moonraker, and they're both Roger Moore Bonds. But this movie was, at the time, the darkness, the darkness and everything was a big turnoff for a lot of Bond fans. But in retrospect, as we look at it now, more people are saying he got a raw deal, and maybe he could have been a great Bond, but he was like, there was a real, one person, James Biradelli, has a real interesting thing. The fundamental weakness in the film is the overemphasis on story may be a mistake, because there are times when License to Kill's narrative bogs it down. And he liked it, but he's like, but it's taut and gripping, but it's not a traditional Bond. And when you get into the area where Bond is such an iconic, there's so much iconography that goes along with being a Bond film, that if you get into it and the movie isn't, like, it needs elements, right? We talked about this. You need good song, you need, some sort of cool car, you need good Bond girls, you need a good villain. And this one, when you start checking it, like, Bond is only as good as all of the pieces that make a Bond movie up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this one's slight.
which, you know,
It's not a View to Kill bad, because a View to Kill I rewatched recently, and wow, is that movie?
Why would you do that to yourself?
It was on. It was on,
that.
and I inadvertently got roped in because I was watching it, and I'm like, Roger Moore's just creeping around the set. So it's not that bad, but it's also like it's not great. Okay, let's get some.
I think where it succeeds, it does so in spite of itself.
Yes, let's see. Hold on. Feeling old that no one got my Get Smart Easter egg. We got it. Get Smart's good. We like Get Smart. We're Maximo Smart fans. Timothy Dalton was an amazing Bond. I agree, but also like he also checks the list with not enough entries. Like when you put Bond as a whole, two things have to happen for Bond to be, for him to be an amazing Bond. I would disagree. I think he's a decent Bond, but to be an amazing Bond, you have to have a body of work. I would say I put that number at 4 films, Rich? You need at least 4. You have to make it. You have to more often than not. The reason we picked the third movie for this Bond-A-thon this year was because by the third movie, that Bond is in place. Mm-hmm. They know who they are. They know how they're going to make their movies. They know what their strong points are as Bonds. So Dalton, he is a good Bond. He's a decent Bond, but he can't be amazing because he doesn't have the body of work.
He doesn't have the runway to really fly.
Yes.
Take off and fly.
Yeah. Love the seriousness the franchise developed with Dalton, Brosnan, and Greg. I would argue that Brosnan is not that serious. That Brosnan is more serious. Roger Moore is how I view the Brosnan Bonds. But the Craig Bonds, we're going to get to them. We're going to get to one of the best Craig Bonds coming up. And Brosnan, I like Brosnan Bonds because I think he's the dead center Connery and Moore, is Brosnan. But again, he has enough of a runway, so we could talk about him. Moore has slid into the least of the Bonds. Not his fault though. Like it's not his. What I would argue for Roger Moore is he's become and slid into the least of the Bonds, but that's not his fault. It's their fault for not replacing him sooner. And also, I'll be honest, any Bond that got some of those scripts would have been like if we were looking at Timothy Dalton and he had A View to a Kill, it wouldn't be great. If Timothy Dalton had Octopussy, wouldn't be great. And no, so I don't know that we can call Roger Moore the least of the Bonds, but he has some really great Bonds. Spy Who Loved Me that we did last week, he's fantastic. But Dalton's performance blazed the trail for Brosnan and Craig, and that evens it up in terms of number of films. Maybe, but I still think you need the runway. Let's talk about that. As we talk about
if Dalton continued, I don't know if we ever would have got Brosnan. And without Brosnan and kind of puttering out with Die Another Day and the absolute need for the franchise to reinvent itself, would they have gone and done?
You wouldn't have gotten Craig. So
would they have done
all of that is one thing about the Bonds that is an interesting thing, Rich. It's
dominoes you have to think about.
You have to have the dominoes happen. So Dalton has to flame out so that we get Brosnan, so that we eventually get to the point where Craig completely reinvents the franchise. And then now, after Craig is done reinventing the franchise, all signs point that we're going to go back with the next Bond. Legacy and franchise, I think. So this is the 16th Bond. It is the second Timothy Dalton Bond. It will be his last Bond. So we will not, if we do Bond-A-thon 2025, we will not have Timothy Dalton to kick around anymore.
We are down 2 Bonds now.
We're down to 3 Bonds.
Yeah, we knocked out 2 already.
Oh no, wait, 4. We have 4. We have 4.
Yeah, we all have.
We're down to 4 Bonds.
Yeah.
We've gotten rid of 2. We have 4 Bonds left. We have Connery, Moore, Brosnan, and Craig.
Yeah, I know earlier I had said that they were developing 2 other Bond scripts for Timothy Dalton. There's a book out that has been recommended to me by a friend of mine, my friend Mike Reyes, who writes for Screen Rant, who is one of their big Bond guys on that site. And it's called The Lost Adventures of James Bond, Timothy Dalton's third and fourth Bond films, James Bond Jr., and other unmade or forgotten 007 projects by a guy named Mark Edlitz, Edlitz. I have not read this book yet, unfortunately, but it comes highly recommended.
It sounds phenomenal.
To the point where I would recommend it to anybody who's interested in the what if world.
I think the legacy interesting thing is, a lot of like, there's some interesting component pieces of this movie that, I think Carrie Lowell being the Bond girl that she wanted to be becomes like kind of a way for other Bond girls to kind of just be what they are. The idea that they put a wig on her early and then she's like, but I'm hotter with no hair, and then you look at her and you're like, she's right, because she knows or understands. I also think, I think there might be some truth to Dalton had to fail so that we would get Brosnan, and then we would have a course correct to Craig, and Craig would get to do everything that he wanted to do, with good directors and good scripts, although they're not all great. You know what I mean? There's a License to Kill in every Bond's. I'm looking at you, Quantum of Solace. Also Spectre, looking at you. So not all of Craig's are great either. Not all of Connery's are great. Not all of Moore's are great. But I think the interesting thing here is it allows for a more serious Bond, but it's also the kind of thing where you got to give them the runway to be able to. It has to be a Bond film. Like, one of the things that the franchise does learn, and the next one we will get after this movie is GoldenEye, right? The franchise learns what it's supposed to be. And this is like one of those things where it's like we course corrected too much, and we kind of acted so much in the best interest of box office and movies and whatever. It course corrects so much, but then when we get GoldenEye, we get everything back. We get the Bond girls. We get the weird, sexual things. We get all the brothers. We get a good villain. We get a good Bond music. We get a Bond car. We get everything back because this one went course corrected too much. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's see. By the way, JW, you're looking great. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I am down about 40 pounds.
Awesome.
Thumbs up. If you go ahead. Thank you, Joe, for bringing it up. If they try and recycle Bond, it will kill the franchise. I don't think it will. I think I am going to be honest with you. I think there's a healthy, if you have a firmly tongue in cheek with regards to what Bond is. Like, I don't think we can have the same as Craig. Like, we can't have the exact same functional Bond as Craig right now. We need to have a different, like, Aaron Taylor Johnson or Cavill or Egerton, right? All of these people are rumored, are all betting things. Whatever one you look at, they're going to have to come up with who they are as Bond, but it's going to need to be a Bond movie. I will say what Craig got the most right was in being able to infuse a regular everyday guy into the Bond universe, like making everything big and large and whatever. So maybe they can do it that way. But I think at the end of the day, like when somebody says I'm going to a Bond movie, there are certain things you want. You know what I mean? And I think this movie is a wonderful look into what happened in the summer of '89, where Bond tried to be everything else, and Bond is more successful when it's Bond. That's just how I feel.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's just finding the right way to make those ingredients work,
now for
a modern audience. Yeah.
Yes. And that's where we're headed. Okay. Rich, where can people find your stuff for a modern audience?
Modern audiences, old-timey audiences, everybody can find my writing.
Everybody's welcome in my tent.
That's right. You can find all of my writing at filmbuffonline.com. We are also on Facebook, so look for our page there. And if you like that, you'll be getting notifications of when we have new stuff that gets posted, as well as some, quick breaking news items, and even, little bits of trivia about what happened on this date in history. I am on 2 other podcasts. One is the Big Picture podcast that I co-host with my very best friend in the world, Natasha Bogutsky, who sometimes shows up here.
We hope she comes back soon. And we know she's working on a show. But
Yeah,
fingers are crossed and we'll get to see her soon.
Either tomorrow or Wednesday, I'll be dropping our latest episode, in which I do a solo interview with Tom Shabula, the author of James Bond and the 60s spy craze, which is a new book that's out from Applause Books. And he's a Wilkes-Barre resident, so we just kind of met up at a coffee shop, and I set up some microphones, and we didn't get kicked out, so that was nice. The other podcast that I do is the Film Scribes, which is the podcast of the Philadelphia Film Critics Circle, which I am a member of. We haven't recorded anything in a couple of weeks, but you can just go to
Summer movie season's coming soon.
And you can find our the entire Philadelphia Film Critics Circle website, which will have a link to our podcasts. And if you're just looking to follow me for all of my crazy comments and stuff on the social medias, I am at FilmBuffRich on Twitter and Blue Sky.
Okay. You can find me at JW the Movie Guy on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, X, whatever it's called, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. I'm all over the place. I also do a fun little show on Tuesday nights with my good friends Jerry and Kyle called Loud and Nerdy. Rich occasionally shows up there too. We also have been doing Friday afternoon reviews. This will continue this week. I think I'm going to see Challengers this week. We did Abigail and, of course, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which both did okay at the box office, but not great this week. So I implore you to go see Abigail and Gentlemanly Warfare. They're a lot of fun. So Tuesday nights you can catch me on Loud Nerdy. We'll be here tomorrow night doing that. Also, if you are inclined, if you are creative and have a new indie movie trailer and a commercial, email it to us. We'll play it on an upcoming Indie Escape Network show. The email address is the.indie.escape@gmail.com. You can find me at JW the Movie Guy and all those other places. And also, I just want to extend a really nice, warm thank you to everybody who paid really close attention to last week's The Spy Who Loved Me podcast. We don't know why. We don't know what's happening, or hopefully you guys are noticing us. It was close to 300 views. So please keep watching. And if you like what you see, like us on Facebook or like us on YouTube. But thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see everybody next week.
Share it as well.
What was that?
Share it as well. Share it as well. Share it. Just go, hey, the other night was cool. Check it out. Boom.
Next week, boom. Pierce Brosnan is back. The World Is Not Enough, with quite possibly the weirdest Bond girl ever. Not Sophie Marceau. The other one is weird. Christmas Jones. It's the worst Bond name ever. And then 2 weeks from tonight, Skyfall. Craig's probably Craig. For me, it's between Casino Royale and Skyfall for me, for Craig. But we'll see everybody next week for The World Is Not Enough. And nobody does it better than Generation Movie. Have a great night. Oh, wait, 2 comments before we go. Great stream, thanks. And Sophie, there she is. Have a great night. We'll see everybody next week. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Thanks.
Oh, wait, hold on. Got to actually end the stream. Bye.
Push the button.